Welcome, everybody, to the second edition of the Coherent Soulcast. I'm here with Connor, Laura, and Lena. We have some people coming in on the live stream now to be the audience members. Today's episode is going to be on ego versus self. We're going to talk about decoding the ego, the necessary illusion of self, spirit is self, and we're more than our human storylines. And we're going to dig deep into what ego is, what it isn't, what spirit is and what it isn't, and how all of us have different perspectives that kind of come together into this cohesive, coherent idea of ego and self. So we're very grateful for you all to be here with us today. Very grateful to share my energy with these wonderful people. And if you could, before we get started, hit that like button, subscribe to our channels, check us out on social media, and share this video with anybody that you think could benefit from it. And so to start us off, I want to give it to Laura because she spoke the least the last time. And I want to get your perspective on what you think the ego is and how have you been able to decode yours throughout your lifetime?
Well, I mean, I think that there's lots of different ways we can view the ego. Sometimes I'm not a fan of how it's represented in metaphysics, but I think in the most basic way, when ego is in the place it's meant to be, it's a tool for being here. It's not in charge. And so often, this is one of the ways that I put it when I work with clients in Chinese medicine wise, is that like the ego is the planner. It's the liver basically. And the liver the ego likes to think it's in charge. But really, who sets the mandate in your life? It's the heart, the soul, the spirit, whatever word you want to put to it. And so often with my own life and working with people, I go, why would you want the liver in charge? The heart is so much wiser. And so, that's really the way that I view it. And I think often life is kind of about walking back through a lot of weavings that we make around the ego back to an almost childlike existence, because when you're a child, the ego isn't in charge. You just are.
I love that.
Yeah.
Lena, you got a perspective?
Yeah, I would like to add into that the ego comes about to protect. And I think that's a big misunderstanding that we have. I come from a Gnostic teachings where we're taught to dissolve the ego. We're taught to get rid of the ego, get rid of the I, get rid of it. Like it's not useful. It's not part of you. It's a separation from you. And that's, even though I'm still in the Gnostic teachings and I love some of the ideas, that one right there didn't resonate with me as much. And the reason for that is because I feel like we build this personality through our lifetime to protect a certain part that doesn't want to be hurt. And when we acknowledge that the part that wants to, that doesn't want to be hurt needs to be heard and needs to be, then the ego is not like a thing anymore. It's not like the main focus in your being, right? Because you're actually listening to the part that is deeper, that it has been like overshadowed by the protectiveness layers and the layers and the layers that we keep putting on ourselves. But it's not that, like, there's this thing going on around where it's kind of contradictory, I thought. And I thought to myself to bring it today, because here it is, the new age world right now going like, get rid of your ego, but then do affirmations with I. So where does that if you're trying to get rid of your ego, you're trying to get rid of that I, right? Like that I is the personality. I am Lina. So I'm trying to get rid of that part of it. So why would I want to affirm that I am happy? Like it kind of contradicts itself a little bit, because it's not actually, you're not actually getting rid of anything or actually doing anything. You're just feeding into that disconnection between the two parts of yourself.
Mhm.
And I think that's really what it is. It's like, yeah, you're feeding it by giving affirmations to it, like I am happy, I am abundant, I am this, I am that, but you're really not acknowledging all the other stuff, all the layers that come with it, right? Like all the layers that don't need to be dissolved, they just need to be acknowledged. I think that's the main idea of it. I think the main idea for the ego and for what it is that it just needs to be acknowledged and needs to be kind of like, hey, I'm gonna be in control today, not you, right? Like we don't want to be reactive, and like, so that's a way that we can kind of start noticing what it is that is comes from spirit, what it is that comes from spirit, and what it is that is coming from that separation that we have built in throughout our lives. Because it's a normal thing that everybody has this. Is everybody has a personality and ego. Is your ego too big or not? You know, it's just up to how much control you're giving it and how much energy you're giving it to.
Mm-hmm. I want to piggyback off of that because you know, Moses goes up on Mount Sinai and he asks Jehovah, like, what shall I call you? You know, and God says, in the Hebrew tradition, God says, Eye Asher Eye. God says, I am that I am. So what's happening there is there's like a recursive fractal invocation of what is when we say I. So I might offer that I agree completely that like the West has taken the Western mindset, how Buddhism and Taoism were received here, especially like in the 1970s. But even before that, I mean, maybe the Europeans, you have people like Leibniz and I mean, there's plenty of Western philosophers who were influenced by some Eastern traditions coming into the East in Europe, maybe a couple hundred years ago. But when it comes to the United States in the 1970s, now you have commercialized Buddhism and commercialized yoga and commercialized all this kind of stuff. So I would offer that. So I agree that we create separation by trying to say that there's this actually real metaphysical instantiated object known as like our ego. Like you have an ego, and it's not terribly different from making the metaphysical statement that like you have a soul. What is that? We don't know. I mean, we're kind of grasping at we're trying to like grasp metaphysically at reality with the mind, right? Which is trying to like make sense of infinity, which is what we actually are instantiated in. But the mind has this finite quality. It's the yin to the yang of the world. Mm-hmm. And but that said, when God made a good point when he said, I am that I am, because what is problematic about saying I am Lina or I am happy or I am any of those things is what comes after the am. So it's putting a conditional on my being. It's saying I am blank rather than just
limited.
Right. It's contracting again infinity into a condition, into a state of being. I am fill in the blank. And that's, I think, Jehovah's point is well taken when he says I am that I am. It's like, first of all, in English we wouldn't even use the word that there. It sounds funny. It's a funny sounding sentence, but to best of my understanding, that is how it's translated. Eye Asher Eye. It's I am that I am.
Did they have grammar back then?
Did they have? Sure, yeah.
So
absolutely.
like what if there's a comma, where is that comma? It completely changes the entire sentence. If it's I am, comma, that I am that, comma, I am, and then one sentence being I am that I am. It's three different sentences.
Sure.
There.
Yeah.
At least in English, which is crazy, Yeah. So
but even those three sentences are very interesting.
It changes the whole vibe. Yeah.
Where they stand is very interesting, right?
For me, like I listened to a little bit of Dwayne Dyer. I'm very careful with the new age philosophers and things like that. I take what resonates and then leave the rest, just because they made so much money while so many people were like going down. They made so much money leading people where. I think it helped, but I also think it might be a psyop. So I'm always very careful with the New Age philosophers. But
Your
Dwayne
Joel
Dyer,
Osteen, your Joel Osteen, you know,
yeah, my favorite.
New Age Joel Osteens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, let's go by the Houston Arena and fill it in for church. That's great. But anyway, so what I got from Dwayne Dyer was when God said that, it was I am that, comma, I am. It was almost like wherever you point, I am that, I am that, I am this, I am this, I am that, I am this. And to me, that's what we're moving towards. I feel like that's what this journey through ego, I believe the ego is the human form. I really, really enjoyed what Lena was saying about you have to acknowledge it. What I'm learning within my own existence is that the only time my ego starts to spool now is when I don't pay attention to myself. And it happens often when I'm inspirited. I'll stay in my spirit. I'll be just floating around, so happy, but I'll start to discount red flags a little bit. I still maybe will like float past something, and all of a sudden I'm getting these thoughts again, and everything's starting to go. And all of a sudden I'm back in those human emotions. I'm back in those human storylines and narratives that I've created for myself. And then I would chase them, and all of a sudden my life's horrible and everything. But then I look around, I'm like, nothing's horrible. Actually, everything's improving. I'm meeting new people and having new opportunities, and everything's great. What am I not doing for myself? And through the years of standing on the ledge of the abyss, I realized that the ego is the scared, neglected, unacknowledged part of us that, like Lena said, formed through the years where we weren't strong enough, smart enough, wise enough to be able to stand up for ourselves. And so I believe in a little bit of more metaphysical stuff than these three, just because they've gone a little bit further down in their study and their research to being more concrete to it. For me, I like to just fly up 100,000 feet and just kind of flow with it. I believe that the soul is made of fractals, and I believe those fractals can be broken off throughout our life when we get traumatized. And I believe we have guides behind us collecting those fractals for us, so that when we go back, quote unquote, right, go back and heal that storyline or narrative that's an illusion, which is called shadow, right? We reclaim those parts of us. They go back into our souls. We become more holy. We become more ourselves, and we no longer need those ego programs to react for us, because we're now strong enough, wise enough to act for ourselves as the oneness, as spirit, as, you know, who we are. And that's when all of a sudden we gain control over ourselves, and we don't have those same triggers like we used to. But what I've also realized is we have to walk through those triggers in order to conquer them. And I want to hear from your perspectives, with still talking about ego. We all have ego, and we've all had to walk through the fire to kind of squelch it and then reclaim parts of us. Do y'all have stories of maybe some real, what were some pertinent and important ego battles you guys went through, and then were able to bring back that, you know, how are you? Words right now are not coming to me.
Good.
Good.
The more you know of the Tao, the less you understand.
There you go. Yeah. So what I want to know is, how did you all get here to be where you are, and to be able to lead from the heart, to choose your disposition, to choose how you feel about your day, and to actually start flirting with the idea that even the self may be an illusion, and we truly are all one, but we had to get through some stuff to get to that point. I want to know how you guys kind of got there.
Do you guys want to go first?
Well, and maybe you can, you know, so it's paradoxical, because Laura and I are always talking about this paradox of like the duality within unity, and the fact that like there is this mind. And if you ask me to give you like a metaphysical explanation of it, I would say that there's something, whether you call it a cosmic joke or a glitch in the matrix or a Gnostic divine spark that trapped in Yaldabaoth's self-image, whatever, okay, like whatever your story surrounding this strange situation that we've been thrown into in life, there is somehow like a concretization of mind, like the yin-most part of this yang aspect of our being concretizes itself into the mind, and then it has this weird fractal relationship with itself that then kind of feeds into its own machinations, which is really the root of all suffering. And that's good. That's like a take on good Buddhist wisdom, good Taoist wisdom, and all that. But there's a paradox. Like, so if we're saying that on the one hand, truly, like, I mean, the unnameable is the eternally real. You know, I mean, this is your Tao Te Ching. The unnameable is the eternally real. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. Naming things is the beginning of all particular things. And so if we're really trying to relate to a world which is not of separation and where all things are one, you know, then what is this thing that's happening? What are we even talking about right now? If there's this thing which we keep bumping up against, and how can I, on the other side of my mouth, say that it's the source of all suffering? There's something in here about, because when I read Taoist alchemical literature, one of my favorites is the Wu Jin Pian. And there's this line in the Wu Jin Pian where I always go to, where I say that it says, you must practice the reversal while in the marketplace. And the reversal is the Taoist alchemical notion that you move backwards from the 1 to 2 to the 3 to the 10,000 things. You're moving the light of creation backwards in on itself. You, as your vessel, however you want to describe it, or turning, it's called turning the light around, Nifa, the method of reversal. So the Wu Jin Pian says that you must practice the reversal while in the marketplace. So that's very different, right? The Wu Jin Pian also says, are you going to go live in the mountains and leave your family just to watch the wind blow the reeds? Are you going to, when will you stop fiddling with your nose? So no offense, I mean, but it's a knock at an obsession with our ideas that the body is connected to the metaphysics, which then we ascend to. We have the story of separation and ascension, that I'm going to use my body to escape my imperfections, right? What is the other line? It says, when will you stop fiddling with your nose? Like, that's a pranayama thing. And yeah, you know, and when are you going to stop learning how to roast seeds? You know, because the Taoists believe that there's immortality tonics in you know, present in the botanical world. Anyway, so yeah, so there's this paradox, and the way that we arrive at that, to answer your question, is through community, right? And that's what's strange and paradoxical about it. Can you arrive at this through your own? Can you kind of set up the foundation for being able to identify stories of separation in your life by just sitting and thinking, like, look, I think you can, Ace.
I think you can start. I think you can start, but having another fractal that's mirroring you is, at least for me. Okay, I can't talk for everybody.
I agree.
For me, it is so imperative that I have that soundboard mirror. I just, because that was how I was able to see that what was real and what wasn't. And now that I'd say I can, but even now would be very difficult. And I would say that for a majority, even the most guru-ish people, I bet you they still have, like, I call it, psychologists have psychologists. They have to. It's like this necessary thing, because when you start taking on so much emotions and mental things of other people, sometimes you get lost in what's yours and what isn't. And I think that's what the mirrors are really, really powerful for.
Right, exactly.
Lina, did you have a story of how you kind of came to this understanding of ego and what made you sort of begin moving towards unity?
So my story, it's, I guess in a way, it's a little different, because I went from like very like Gnostic teachings where, like I mentioned, that is very like about like dissolving that part of yourself, to like a very kind of like guilt-free mindset where I don't constrain myself to need to see myself in those eyes of like that I have these issues. I think the way that it was spiritual guilt, like, to be honest, to be completely and like honesty, like it was a spiritual guilt that made me realize that this was more harmful than it was good for me. That it was more harmful for me to think of all the little things that I wasn't doing, or that I was not accomplishing, or that I wasn't like being good for, you know, or the things that I wasn't doing that I was supposed to be doing. And then I started thinking I'm like, this is affecting me so deeply. Like, it's affecting me so much that I can't, that it can be a way. It can be a way that I feel this guilty about not doing some work that is not even possible because I've been trying to do this for a year. You know what I mean? It's like since I was 13, I was doing all these things and all these meditations, transcendental meditations to get rid of parts of myself, to get this. And to be honest, when I was the happiest and when I was the fullest is when I didn't believe in anything. And it was interesting because that made me realize that everything is nothing and it doesn't really matter all the names that we call it. It doesn't matter all the things that we do for it. It doesn't matter how many crystals or how many good things you have or how many astral projections you have or how lucid dreaming you are. You know, like none of that matters if you do not like understand that all it is you. Like all it is that part that is wholesome, that is you. And that is the most freeing feeling ever. If something's making you feel guilty, run away from it. If something's making you like that you're reactive, so now I'm guilty because my ego is acting this way and now I'm reactive, feel that emotion because it's meant to be felt. It's not meant to be, it's not an excuse, but it is a feeling that you need to feel. And that repressiveness of like not being reactive, that the repressiveness of not saying something negatively to not affect somebody else, or that also that thing that with the toxicity of like I'm gonna take everybody out that is not making me feel good. Like do you take yourself away from an environment to be healthy? Like you just become healthier by being in an environment that is like that is filthy. Like that's really what it is. Like you clean yourself by being stronger than the environment. You don't diminish yourself or make yourself smaller to fit anywhere, right? So why would you want to do that to yourself too? And that's really where it comes with all these ego things and all these where they're making us feel smaller because now you have issues. Now you have more things that you have to accomplish.
Now you got labels.
Exactly. Now you have more work to do. Like where are you not doing your work?
I'm gonna need to see you again at I'm gonna see you again in our office. It's another $150 next week.
Yeah,
but
or like
you get an hour.
Come for my spiritual guidance. I'm gonna help you become and awaken your chakras. And no,
I'm gonna download light codes into you and gonna activate your pineal gland.
And I mean that's in the monetary sense, right? But it's crazy to me that like even for example like self-help books really focus on making you feel shittier.
Sure.
I believe that.
Yeah.
Like I love like all this like transformational stuff. I love like healing because there's aspects of myself that I want to like polish. I wouldn't say I'll polish them. You know what I mean? But there's not defined, maybe, yes, like make it shinier. I don't know, like, but it's not something that I want to get rid of. It's not something that, because when you actually, I feel like when you actually bring in this light and you love more, all these things, all these other things like kind of like fade away. When the virtues grow on you, if you're a good person and all your virtues and all the things that you do are good, then there's no space for all that crap.
I believe that. I 100% believe that. Something I've been really focusing on lately and just meditating on, awake, conscious, doesn't matter, has been this idea that all of your suffering is the love that you withhold from yourself and others. And I feel that that is the basis of ego. And we're taught when we're young how to withhold love from ourselves or others. And then we do that to ourselves. And then the ego starts to form. All right.
I like it.
As a game character, all right, we're basically, this vessel to me is a game character that we are like downloading ourselves into and having experience and form through.
Are you a mage? Are you a rogue?
Wizard, actually. Yeah.
Wizard.
Yeah. With a top hat, and I got a staff, and it has a clear quartz crystal on it, and it's wrapped in bronze. So, so I just for me, I guess that's how I best define my existence, and it allows me to walk through it without taking it so serious, so I can actually enjoy it. For other people, they're just happy to be the spirit and form and that, this and that. But for me, I've always been a cerebral person. As I'm moving into spirit more and more into my heart. So concrete explanations help me navigate this existence that has been very, very hard for me. And like what we're moving into now into this conversation is the idea of acceptance, allowance, and surrender. And what was funny was that what Lena was talking about is exactly what Connor said when he said, when are you going to stop fiddling with your nose? It's almost kind of like what she went through, where she realized she's doing all these things, and there's all these expectations of her to do all these things. And they were actually making her less happy. They were making her less connected to spirit, less connected to herself. And she was feeling guilty. And it was actually creating ego, creating trauma programs that forced her to go on this whole journey just to then come right back to the naturalness of it all again, which is just to self.
Well, because I feel like it also becomes like almost like you're resented, like you resent like not being able to become this person that everybody is becoming, right? Like you see these people that are like the spiritualists doing all these great things and all these things, and then you're like, why can I do the same? And especially when people are starting the journey, they start like doubting themselves and doubting their experience because somebody else's experience is stronger or more valuable or more valid than theirs, even though like actually maybe it's even more dangerous to play around and trying to get out of your body when you have no idea what you're doing. You know, the silver cord is very thin, and I think like all these things that they're just additions, but they're not necessary. Like, you know, like all these things that like, I love metaphysical stuff. Like I do pendulum healings. I read cards. I do astrology. I do all these very metaphysical things, but they don't rule my life. I don't live by anything but myself and my spirit and what feels good within me. So like, I don't chase, I guess in a way it's like chasing that, like chasing this like fix. You're chasing the fix. You're trying to fix yourself by chasing this thing that is not really ever possible, because we're actually just as evolving as we are, we're evolving as a collective. And as if we don't all evolve, we're all stuck here. Nobody's moving. I think it's so funny because everybody thinks that you can just leave society behind. You can never leave. You can be in the woods, be completely, like you said, like hermit mode, not deal with the world, look at the wind, but you will still suffer. And why? Because we're all interconnected. We're all on like collective unconscious that are a web. And like the more that we feel good within ourselves, the more we give to the world. That's really what it is. Like the more that you feel more wholesome and the more you feel like there's no guilt within your heart, there's this then the light shines right through. You become a conductive of energy without even trying, without doing any work, because all you're doing is loving who you are.
It's beautiful.
And accepting who you are for that moment that you were.
Absolutely. And Laura, you have an interesting perspective, not only from your own life and your very profound way of looking at things, but all the women you've worked with and helped who have gone through this, one of the scariest things in their life, giving birth to a child, maybe not being healthy and giving birth to a child, maybe not being healthy and getting pregnant, and all these things. What are some of the experiences you have had when it comes to spirit and ego, coming from this perspective of a woman creating life and then allowing the programs from her past to get in the way of the greatness and the beauty of that?
Well, I would say, you know, like in our kind of group of women who do midwifery, we have like a joke, like don't like process your trauma in birth. That's a bad idea. Let's do it beforehand. You know, and so a lot of the work that I do involves that. And women are incredibly blessed to have a built-in initiation of childbirth, but also just simply having your period every month. And I think that we have a cultural story and a cultural program that doesn't necessarily support that. And so a lot of the work I do is reframing that and putting it in a sense of truth of like the advantage that we have of being in this initiation to access experience of I am, you know, like your period every month is a little death. We get to experience death every month. We get to experience the fear of death and childbirth. You know, there's not, if if a woman doesn't do this, then they've already done quite a bit of spiritual work before they've gone into labor. But there's very few labors I've been to where a woman, we don't have this come to Jesus conversation where she says, I can't. And it's all about all the women around her and her partner saying, you can, and you are doing it. And that's actually, we don't say you can.
Yeah.
Nope, you're already doing it.
You are doing
You
it.
are, yes.
You are,
You're
right?
sitting in the room pushing, right? You're doing it.
But there's, and I would
The
just
knife's edge.
yeah, the knife's edge. So that point where you're in this experience of I am and totally there is so easy. Like, there's two sides to this edge, right? And the closer you're to that edge of I am, you're actually even closer to the chaos on the other side of it, right? And I guess I was kind of thinking while you guys were speaking about this, that I think for me, what drew me down my pathway of like doing religious studies was the experience, the things that I experienced as a child of oneness and like the ecstatic religious experience. And that led my mind, my ego, to really go down this very, very intellectual path of studying religions and studying practice and really like wanting to understand how do you get into this place of ecstatic experience. And it's, for me, it's always been getting back into an unconditional I am, to rewind the mind who says, these are all the things that I need to do to get into that place. Because what we do is our soul has an experience, this full, wholesome experience of unity, of I am, and that's simply what it is. And then we love to spin out from there. And I think that there's beautiful things that the ego comes up with, actually. And there's also very negative things that the ego comes up with. And as someone who studied a lot of religions, like, they are beautiful things. There's beautiful stuff that people's egos come up with to explain this experience that we're having. But ultimately, we're all trying to get back to the experience. And it's related to, for me, Sufism and mysticism explains this in its best way, where Rumi, most people know Rumi's poetry, but he actually does a lot of essays too. And in his essays, he goes into a lot of metaphysics. He'll be like, this is the relationship with God, this is how we relate to each other, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end, he'll say like 2 sentences where he's like, but in the end, it's undescribable, it's ineffable, we don't know what the hell is going on, and it's God, and it's one, period, dot. And what you'll notice in Arabic writing, especially Sufi writing, is they'll have a dot at the end of poetry. They'll have a dot at the end of these essays. And the dot is God.
It's the oneness.
It's the oneness, because we'll never get away from that. And so I guess, that's...
No, it's beautiful. No, it was a really wonderful way to explain it, because as you were saying that, what struck me was that question you asked me when we were talking a couple of weeks back that really hit it home for me. And you said, what are the conditions that you place on your existence that keeps you from saying I am happy and meaning it, that keeps you from saying I am successful and being it? And I was just, hit me so hard right in the heart and the third eye. And I kept sitting with that. And it really is absolutely true. And to me, that is the ego programs. The ego is neither good or bad. It is. That's just what it is. And is it? We don't know. We really don't know if it is or isn't. So it's to each individual person, we all have our own experience through ego. But that's, I feel, what gives this human experience so much tangibility, gives this human experience a point, because it's so hard because of the ego. And something Lina was said to me that a couple weeks back that really resonated too, is that we're always trying to escape these vessels. We're always trying to escape being human. And I watched this clip the other day on Telegram where this woman she was just talking to her friends on a video chat. And she's like, I just want to give you guys some advice. She goes, when you stop being mesmerized by your awakening, and you can find the grace and power in the moment that you're living, in the body that you have, when you stop trying to escape this human life and move into it, that is when we change the world. That is when the world heals. And that is when we become one as individuals together, right? It's a weird paradox. And the way I look at this thing is the way you're talking about it. You know, Rumi has this perspective, Connor Keys has this perspective, Lina has it. But what if it took all the people to have all these different perspectives lined up, making almost a globe, to where all these different perspectives come into this one point, right? That period in the middle, we're all focusing our third eye there. And then that's what creates the reality and how to explain it. And we can't explain it without every single perspective, good or bad.
Yep.
And that is what I'm realizing is, you know what ego is? Ego, you can tell it's your ego talking or being some way when somebody does something that pisses you off or you don't like. Because in reality, it's something they're doing that reminds you of what you're doing, and it's a reflection. And the body's going, hey, I love you, but that's what you're doing. I don't like it. We need to work on it. We want to project out and blame those people. But in reality, it's the body communicating us, tell us, hey, you might have something inside you need to heal still. And so I want to just hit on three words that are very important. I'm big on words and concepts. I feel the path through ego is done through acceptance, allowance, and surrender. And I would like to talk to you three about what you feel those words are to you, and how have you applied them on this path through ego to now create an experience that you love. Like I really have begun to really love this experience, and nothing really different has changed. It's just I have, because I chose to, through those concepts. So what do you got?
So amen to that. I mean, to those words is like blessings, you know, may we have that. And that's, you know, and so it's so, see, look, I was about to point out the story, like stories of separation that I hear in, you know, that I heard, Ace, frankly, in like your description, with the story of separation, right? So there's this like paradoxical duality of kind of this inescapable way that the mind tries to relate to being, relate to what is, relate to reality. And so, you know, when you said like that we serve as mirrors, and that the ego or the self or whatever, which if you want to get real metaphysical, you could, and especially in human design, you would say that those are very different things, the ego and the self, right? And in Vedic philosophy and whatever. But that the idea that the ego is recognizing that there's something which needs to be worked on is a story created by the ego, by the mind. And that's a story of separation, that there's something that needs to be worked on. So long as what's coming back is like, oh, I've got shit to do. There's somewhere I need to be. There's something I need to do. There's someone I need to be, other than exactly what is, who I am, and all that moment. Right. This now moment. Then that's that story of separation. That's that separation coming in and interfering with the process. You know, I have a thing that I like to harp on when it comes around, is that healing doesn't take work. And that is really, it's controversial, you know, I mean, because again, like you said, like the new age and the spiritual and the natural medicine and the, you know, I mean, this is what we do for a living. And yet
we're acupuncturists.
Right. But you love it so much, it's not work though. You're not working when you do it. You're just doing, you're being.
You're undoing, right? This is the Taoist.
Oh, I like it. Yes.
This is, well, non-doing. I mean, this is the Taoist motif that the master, when the master accomplishes their work, the master works, the sage, the saint, whatever, the Tao, you know, the master accomplishes their work. And when the master is done, they walk away from their work and the people say, look, we did it all by ourselves. You know, so.
I mean, it's also like, you know, the person's body that's doing the work, where it's healing. Yes. It's like, it's.
Oh yeah, they're healing themselves. You're just like giving them the support.
right, like it's like a knot, and then like I feel like we're untangling the knot, but everything has been and will be the knot, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whether it's a string or it's a knot, it's still a rope, you know what I mean? It's still the same thing, whether it's tangled up into emotional distress or happiness, is still a rope that is still connecting us all together.
Mhm.
But
I
wouldn't
think
it, okay.
the most valuable thing I think for us to take away from this is that the acceptance part. I think everybody should listen to that part. The acceptance, like accepting that part of you as you, and being and just doing you and being a little bit better, whether it is not with guilt, you know, like you're not trying to fix anything. What you are, you're just trying to be, like you're just trying to be aware in this moment. You're trying to be in this body that you have, in this mind that you were carrying, and this heart and the soul that you're having this experience. It's that is more powerful, that it is bringing into the world more light. That's what's bringing more. If we love this experience, if that's like the ultimate rebellion. Have you noticed that? Is the ultimate rebellion is to love yourself, like in every kind of way, whether it's the new age way. They're telling you need to fix yourself, homie. We all need healing. Like I saw something that it was like, that we were talking about, remember? I was like, well, what are you bringing into this traumatic experience? Like, what are you doing actively to work on your traumas and like
Right.
be a better human being?
Right.
I'm like, that's just so, what? Like, why are you focused on that? Like thought and energy goes where you're focused at. If you're focused on all the defects that you have, then you're going to be stuck there forever trying to fix them defects instead of bringing up the virtues and doing like what you're meant to be doing and just focusing on you and like actually really being this human being and being in this experience.
Mhm.
What do you got, Laura?
I love that, because thinking about your trauma, so often we pick up the story of victimhood.
Yes.
But the thing is there's little initiations throughout our life. Like if we're going to talk about stories that have truth seated in them, then there's nothing wrong with the state of victimhood when it's transitory.
Yes. Perfect.
The point is to move out of it and through it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that state can help you surrender a lot of the kind of junk that we have, like the basket that covers the lantern of the soul. This is a very Sufi thing, but that letting go and surrendering a lot of these stories that we have is that there's nothing to fix. So really it's about surrendering the idea that there's something to fix, that there's somewhere to go. There's nothing to do.
Right.
There's nowhere to go. You're already here.
It
took you so long to get here.
Yes.
It took so long to get here. So why not be here? Why not be in the present moment?
That's what that woman was saying. She said the majority of your entire existence, which is infinitude, correct, was spent in these higher angelic communities with these amazing beings and doing incredible things in higher consciousness dimensions. And now you're here for a reason, and all you're trying to do is escape it.
Right.
Yeah.
And if we're going to talk about New Age ascension, right, which I do agree with Connor, it says ascension is an illusion because we're already ascended beings. I just believe the vessel is ascending. So that's where I talk about ascension from a physical standpoint. I believe the vessel is changing and with the energy of the planet, and because we're moving into a new phase. That's just my belief. But as spirits, we're already ascended because that's why we're here living this experience. And it was just like, how are you going to ascend if you hate your existence? How are you going to ascend in New Age speak if you are unacceptant of what's happening, if you're not allowing source to work through you, if you're not surrendering to the universe and what it needs from you, you know? And so I want to hear before we move into the next part of this conversation.
Can I comment on that?
I wanted to hear Connor's perspective on that.
Gospel of Thomas says, right?
Yeah.
She knew I was going to
He's
do
like,
it.
he's like, yes, yes, Gospel Thomas, let's go.
Gospel of Thomas says, the disciples come to Christ and they say, Master, Master, there's another passage that plays into this, and it paints some incredibly contrary notions of what Christ is about. And it's fascinating to me. So the disciples come and they say, Master, how should we pray? Should we give alms? Should we give to charity? Should we fast? Should we recognize the Sabbath? All these questions. And there's other questions. It's like, should men be circumcised? All these kinds of questions. Christ's answer to that, by the way, specifically in the Gospel of Thomas, is if circumcision was necessary, then men would be begotten from their mothers circumcised. I mean, it says that explicitly. And
That's a whole other conversation. That's a whole other bag of worms.
My point is that
Yeah.
my point, in Carner's roundabout way of explaining things, my point is that they ask Christ these questions, like, what do we do? Like, should we
Show me.
fiddle with our noses? Should we learn how to roast seeds? Should we go live in the mountains and watch the reeds blow, to make it a Taoist alchemical reference? And Christ's answer is, do not lie and do not do what you hate.
Oof.
Christ's answer. And so hold on. So what's really interesting to me when I look at that, we could take that and at the surface level interpret that as do not lie means don't lie.
Yeah.
Yeah, just don't tell people that you're not, don't tell, don't lie.
Well, duh. Like, duh, don't lie. But what are we doing to ourselves when we allow our minds, which belong on the industry factory floor, and the soul belongs in the control tower, in the control room, controlling everything seamlessly, intuitively through space and time and all that kind of stuff. And the mind is really good at what it's good at. And what it's good at is knowing how and when to direct this vessel. If you want to be metaphysical, I'm being metaphysical now. But if you want to know that, the mind is good for directing the body in 3D space and time, and it's good at taking facts and information, and at the right point in time, it can regurgitate those facts, or it knows how to operate machinery, whatever. Okay. Knows how to do certain things.
It's a digestion machine of information.
Of information, right. Exactly. Yes, absolutely.
The spleen.
The spleen, earth element. We're being Chinese medicine over here. And so, that's what the mind's good for. But to what extent does Christ saying, his answers to all those questions, should we fiddle with our noses? Should we pray? Should we give to charity? He says, don't lie. Don't do what you hate. And to what extent might that don't lie actually mean, like, don't lie to who? Of course we shouldn't lie to each other. Duh. Don't lie to yourself. And that mind, trying to bang its way into the control room and bang its head on the control panel and make up stories, thinking that it knows what's going on and knows better than the soul does. And what is the soul? The soul is just being, rather than just what is being what is. The mind, paradoxically, for some reason, whether it's a cosmic joke or not, it interferes with that process. Mm-hmm. And we start to worry, and we start to make up stories, and we start to think about the future, and we start to think about the past, right? And don't do what you hate. The whole reason why I wanted to talk about the Gospel of Thomas is because you said something about doing what you hate. Anyway.
And I also think, though, that, like, when the soul is in charge in the control room, we actually don't even really know what that looks like. And I think that we have this story of control, like, all of a sudden, if the soul was in charge, like in New Age circles, like, we'll know exactly what we want to do. We'll know what direction to go in. We'll know these things. And the reality is that the soul is so alien from the mind that the soul in charge is beyond our wildest expectations, and we can't put expectations on what that is, right. And so I would theorize this theory that the soul in charge is actually ultimate surrender, that there's that you give up on the idea that there's something you're supposed to do with your life, that you give up on the idea that there's a particular direction that you need to go in, that if you surrender and you allow it to happen, then it will all unfold from there. Yeah. In a world of unity, it will all unfold from there. There's no reason to worry about what you're supposed to do with your life.
Non-doing and everything. Practice non-doing and everything will fall into place.
It's
Nature
just a
does-
giant, it's backwards, upside down, bizarro world. It's just the way we've been programmed and trained and whatever you want to call it. Like everything you're not supposed to do, we've been programmed to do. So we have to undo it. So we have to learn and grow and evolve. I started asking, what helped me on this path was when I started asking, why is this happening for me? Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? And once I started really digging into that answer and asking every situation I'm in, why is this happening for me? And what can I pull from it? The lesson, it's just like, boom, 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 you just fly off.
I want to say something in
Go ahead.
this regards to what Lena said earlier, where I like that, Lena. You said that what I'm sometimes drawn to do is to polish aspects of myself. And so I love that word because it made me think. I actually looked up on YouTube. I was like, I looked up on YouTube while we're talking. I wanted to find a time-lapse video of how snails make their shells. But I found no such thing. However, we all know.
I found no such thing.
What? No, the one YouTube video that's not
I will
on YouTube.
find it one day.
We will find this. It's on Rumble.
However, we know that the way that seashells are made is it's simply sand and time and the flow of water and the movement of the moon and stuff. So what's actually polishing us is not even you that's polishing you, because
the environment,
by this estimation, in the metaphysical sense, you don't even exist. And you're just in a stream of perfect flow, the clearest, most beautiful, cleanest water. And you're this perfect little pebble that's just being continuously polished into even greater perfection.
And if you think about it, what happens when a rock resists that thing? It becomes pointy, right? Like a cliff that resists the polishedness of it. It becomes, well, it's nature is literally like the observation of our soul.
Yes.
Because it is, the universe itself is our inner self, right? Like everything is one thing. So everything is such a reflection. And the other day we were talking about how I was telling Connor, I was like, it's literally a cosmic drama. Like really what we're living through is a cosmic drama. We're just seeing how everything is and how it is. And we are just seeing it. We're just seeing it through. And one thing that I wanted to mention is that I think the reason why it affects people so much, this kind of ego and this kind of disruption, is because there's a line that you're traveling, your birth and your death, and you're traveling through this like mechanical line where you're like waking up, going to work, going blah, blah. So when somebody tells you that there's something wrong, it's obviously that there's something wrong because you're living through this lifetime of like self, like not being anything, just being, just being a robot for something other than yourself. So obviously there's something wrong right there. Like there's something going on where you're not like you're automatic right now. You're living through this. And now the spiritual world comes in. And what does it make? And where if you living through this lifetime, through this like spiritual experience, you're only going up and down, right? You're kind of like going down where you're experiencing like this traumatic experiences and all these painful things that will really push you upwards. But where you have to be is where that cross meets, right in the middle, the eternal presence, where the mechanical and the spiritual meet. You are that bridge. But we don't live in that eternal presence. We live either too up here where we think that we're having all these spiritual experiences and we're like better than everybody because we know more things, because an angel or because something comes to me and tells me that I'm like up here, but we're not down here and we're not like living in this mechanical world anymore, right? We're really not, like, which is completely valid, but you're disconnecting again. Right? Like you're still disconnecting that cross. You're still disconnecting what connects us. And if you look at the astrology in astrological symbols, what is the earth? The earth is just a cross and a circle inside of it.
Yeah.
That's it's literally like we're us living through it and having all these experiences through the material, through this mechanical world, because you are that bridge. And the only way that you can bring all these things back into earth and bring this knowledge into the world is by you being physically here.
100%. That's kind of
Right? Like,
what I've been given downloads about is like, it takes a human to visualize it, to materialize it and bring it into this formed reality. We have all the realm of possibility up here where we're dreaming of it and everything like that. But unless you're physical form, that's the whole point, is we can create and manifest simultaneously. That's why we desired to come into these vessels and go through this this struggle and challenge of being human and remembering who we really are, is because in reality, we want to be able to create as well as manifest, because what I believe happens when we're not informed, you just think it or consciously are aware of it and comes to be. And that's why I feel a lot of us are so impatient, especially as children. We're just like, we're so used to everything being right where we want it. And all of a sudden we get here and everything takes so much time. It's just so much patience. We're like, this doesn't make any sense to me. It's because it's denser, and we chose to go into a denser form to gain the lessons, I think, of patience, of surrender, of letting go, of, I think those are some, I think these lessons that we're really picking up from this path of being human is very hard to gain up there. I feel that this is a special playground for those concepts to really earn your way to that unconditional love that we all talk about. But in reality, what is unconditional love? It's just, it's presence, it's pureness, it's unity, it's being who you are in the now moment. And that may not be who you are in the future, who you were in the past, but who you are now is perfect. And to be able to accept that, now that is where freedom, and that is where that bliss comes from. And so I kind of want to move us into the second part of this conversation, which is self. And we talk about ourselves a lot, and myself and I am, and we talk about this often. But what like Connor and Laura like to talk about, self is in itself is an illusion. And so let's caveat off and move it from going from just ego, what it is, what it isn't, and describing that, to what is self, what isn't self, how is it an illusion, and how is it a necessary illusion for this experience in order for us to grow. There's like people's eyebrow.
What?
Yeah. Do you some? No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, so I was thinking about this earlier as you were talking too, that that Lena, you were talking about, you're on this continuum between birth and death. And what it made me think of is some of Ra's concepts about things in human design, and that is what human design refers to it as, is it's funny because like in human design, you don't say my life, you say the life, and that is the life, capital T, capital L. So you are not actually living anything that's independent to you. You are so deeply in relation, and you're so radically out of control, where the closest and best thing to some kind of control that would feel good to our souls in this life is exactly the opposite kind of control that the mind is trying to impose on our experience here, right? And that anyway, it's called the life. So capital T, capital, and I just love it. It says that you're a cell in the life. You are a cell in this body of this continual flow of the life. And when I think of self now, I used to in undergrad, I was really into Vedic philosophy, and I would read the Upanishads and things like this. And so there's a big focus on what's Brahman, Atman, and some of these metaphysical concepts are often like these spiritual concepts are often translated as self. So that's the thing, and it says the self is infinite. The self doesn't need anything. The self is just is. I mean, so it's exactly what we're talking about. But these days, there's that. I can't bring any of the Upanishads to mind per se, like anything from them, but what it most often reminds me of is this concept of self in human design. And so in human design, yourself is how you are defined by your particular configuration. And I really think, the really no, I don't want to say that because I don't want to act like I'm, making a judgment, but I'll say that it's one of Ra's major things, the supposed founder or messenger quote of human design, is that you don't need any of the actual human design system. It's just a point. He's just pointing to ancient wisdom, which is found everywhere. And in human design, the self is that which you are brought here to do, that which your definition dictates that you do in this life. And the only thing stopping you from doing that, again, paradoxically, right? The only thing stopping you from doing that is identifying with other people's definition. So you are defined in a way that dictates that you are here to do something in particular with your life. Then you get into the whole complex system. But all that aside, other people have definition. And so where you are undefined in your life, provided if two people come into each other's aura, they say, it's like two people come into relation with one another. This person will have certain definition and this person will have certain definition. And if they don't know their self from their not self, then they will identify their selves as what is actually not defined in them. And they will say, it's what we all do with society. We say, oh, I'm supposed to be a lawyer and have a white picket fence and the whole flipping thing, right? So that, I think that human design has a brilliant description of it. And it's just about knowing what's you and what's not you. And knowing that where you are not, like if it's not part of your journey and your path and your purpose for being here, then other people will, and it happens unconsciously too. That's what's interesting. And things is, some people can weaponize their human design. And I shudder to think that anyone would actually do this black magic, but he's talked John Martin talks about where sometimes people will.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Sure. I mean, I wouldn't either. People are damaged. People are hurt. People have the idea that they're so lacking that they would actually think that their lowercase w will, ego, mind, instantiation thing is able to actually dictate this reality by doing things like, like we would call black magic or psychic kind of warfare and things like that. So, but often, like if you have a defined whatever it is in the system, your definition in that center, I'm using a little bit of human design language, but your definition in that center will unconsciously influence other people. So like say if you have a defined pressure to think, mental pressure, there's like a defined head center, then you being in the presence of other people with an undefined head center can cause those people that you're in, take this, it's human.
Kind of like puzzle pieces, like as you're saying, and
Right.
like all I
It
can think
absolutely
about is puzzle pieces, and like when you come together, when there's something that is lacking, you're just kind of fitting into that area that is not generating inside of your body, because we are one thing.
Yeah, it absolutely is that. It absolutely is. When you look at the charts and you do a connection chart between two people, you very much get this puzzle piece. They call it aura mechanics. That the way that your system is arranged has a certain frequency, vibration. They use those kinds of physics metaphors that we often find in the New Age and stuff. And they will, right? It is. Like, let's be honest that when we say frequency and vibration, there was no concept of frequency or vibration until the oscilloscope and the cathode ray tube was invented. I mean, we're aware of vibration and frequency, and it's an ancient concept, and there's a whole Pythagorean way of looking at things, and number is that, yes, but I think that we wouldn't anyway. Woo! So
I think it's really interesting. I think it's really, sorry to I just really
go ahead. You got
it. Me off this boat.
I was gonna say something about the frequency, because if you really think about it, if you really conceptualize yourself as a vibrational being, right, that we are, because we're vibrating at different speeds, and that's really what it is. Like, we're just kind of vibrating. When you're hitting an octave, it has to go down.
What do you mean?
Like when you're hitting an octave in like a frequency, you go up. And like if it's fast enough, like the down doesn't feel as strong because it goes up right away, right? Like when there's a higher vibration or higher frequency, the vibrations are kind of going like this, and there's smaller space for the dip to be felt. I don't know if you guys are understanding what I'm trying to say.
I have no idea.
Tracking.
let me try to explain it a different. It's because I want to explain this idea. So the frequencies of, like, let's say the like visible light, right? Like where it goes, like you see the visible light as going as a frequency that goes up and down, right? The higher you're vibrating in the new agey way, you're vibrating faster, like meaning where like you're like vibrating at a speed of, like, let's say violet, because violet vibrates in a higher speed as red vibrates in a slower speed than violet does. So if you're vibrating in a violet color, let's say you're vibrating up here, there's slower, the dip is not felt as much when you're vibrating faster and you're going up faster.
Yeah.
But if the vibration is slower, you're feeling the dip a lot more. So what happens with this? And what it's something that I just thought about, and I guess like it downloaded into my brain when you were talking about this as self, is that we are that string, right? And wherever we are in our like life, where it is, we're in that octave of vibration. So whether we're vibrating in a higher frequency, like we say, you're just really just being, because you're just allowing yourself to like express fully your full spectrum. But when you're like vibrating in a slower, then more things are harder to come up. Like the slope is harder, so the coming up is harder. So when you're like it, like for example, what I think about when you meet with somebody that has a completely different energy than you, right? Like let's say somebody that doesn't believe anything you're saying. You guys will not like it's speaking completely different languages in any way. And it's because this kind of vibration is just in a different way. And the self is just that. That's how I see as the self, as this vibrational being that is connected to the whole universe, and whatever it is that you're vibrating in, your energy and yourself is also vibrating in. That string of music is your soul. I think about it like this. It's like one verse, universe, one verse. We're just one music.
I love it.
We're in one verse of music.
And it's beautiful. That was a really beautiful point, because as you were explaining that, what I was getting was when we really jump headfirst into this healing journey, when we decide to stop distracting and running our lives by ego programs and actually learning what self is and who we are, we start off again using chakras and using new age terminology and everything like that. It's harder to get momentum going up because you're starting off at these lower chakras. You got to clear out your fears. You got to clear out this idea that you're not good enough through your sacral. You got to clear out your solar plexus, which is your power center, which is your confidence if you're not confident with yourself. And as we stop feeding our lower chakras with alcohol and sex and drugs and all these things that kind of distract us from self, and we clear those chakras and we move higher and higher, what you're saying is it becomes easier and easier to gain the momentum to get higher into the clearing.
No, yes, I understand what you're trying to say, but that's not what I was trying to say. What I was trying to say is that it's
I see what you're saying. Yeah, you don't when your vibrations here and someone else's vibrations there, and it's so different, you're just not going to be able to vibrate on the same octave.
Well, you just
like
don't
you're
understand each other.
Okay.
It's just like a completely different like thing. But what you're trying to say is that when you're kind of starting slower, you're in a slower pace vibration.
Yeah,
But
it's
think
like
about
harder.
this,
And
there is no
muffier.
path. You can jump from here all the way to here by just thinking that you are love, and instead of thinking that you are
I agree with
pain.
that. I agree with that, but the
Like
practicality.
the slope is harder.
Yes.
Yes, I agree that the
That's
slope
where
is
that's the
harder.
only thing I'm ever really coming at everyone with, from my perspective, is yes, in the perfect world scenario, yes, we could just say I love me and I love me, but that's just not how it works. So practicability, people who have those traumas that they believe in, those storylines, those ego programs, it's harder for them to just go, I love myself, and just believe it. And there's also saying something like that, like an affirmation, and then feeling it. We don't feel it. So we keep saying these affirmations and never come true. It's because in reality, we don't really believe them. So how do you bridge that gap? How do you bridge the gap where you know what to do, you know what has to happen to get you from ego to self, yet for whatever reason, it's hard for you to choose it? What are some ways that you've found working with clients and people that have gotten them to choose differently for themselves. Go ahead, Connor.
Nothing has to happen.
Yeah.
Well, I think I think
I
understand
hear
you're
what you have
trying
to say. I hear what you have to say, but I'm going to say this, and I'm going to be serious. Tell that
Yeah.
to a veteran who's standing on a ledge with a pistol in his mouth.
Well, I to be
And that's
honest,
what I'm trying to get at. And that's the
No.
angle I'm coming from, is the very real human storylines that actually take our lives.
I know. And
And
so
so
yeah, and so we like Laura and I talk about this a lot. In fact, yeah, and in fact, the suicidal person is actually, I think, the limit case for the medicine of spirit, and how it's possible to find. I mean, it says, hold on, excuse me, whatever. The Tao is a well that is never used up, right? And so it's not only that, but the Tao is not only a well that is used but never used up. It is also, and I'm nearby and easy to seek. And that's the paradox of the fact that what we're searching for, this wholeness that we're searching for, is present.
yes.
And so someone's mental stories, you can have all kinds of stories layered on thick. Doesn't matter. It's actually like just frosting on a cake. You can cut through that. And that doesn't mean it's not, I don't know. I don't want to say that it's challenging. I'd rather
That's affirming.
yeah, I'd rather say that it's nearby and easy to seek. It's there, it's present, it's right. This is why.
Well, because you're affirming it as well. Because if you're saying that it's hard and that it's
Yes.
difficult, then you're affirming and you're bringing that energy into that space.
Yes.
But I also, I think what you're trying to say is that how do you come up with, like, how do you say that to somebody that is struggling, that doesn't see that part, that is completely put dark goggles, blood goggles in their face, and they don't see that light that we're kind of seeing right now. And I think my answer, at least for me personally, is to get rid of that guilt.
Okay.
There is no guilt. You don't have to feel any type of guilt. And I think that's the most crucial part. The shame and guilt is what have people down there.
It's absolutely true.
So when
Absolutely
you start encouraging people to, like, even like just words of affirmation to somebody that, for example, struggling with like seeing themselves in that way, then you start actually viewing them that way. Because if you don't view them that way, they can never view themselves either. Because there's these goggles that they're not taking out. There's these goggles that they cannot see through. And if you can't see it either, then there's no help.
And what's so beautiful about that is it wasn't until I returned to God did I get off that ledge. And it wasn't until I returned to the idea of self, spirit, and something bigger than me that I get rid of that guilt and shame that was able to permanently take me off that ledge. So you two made really wonderful points to the questions I asked. And if Laura has anything to follow up, I would love to hear that. Because I want to talk exactly. It's a good caveat to get into this last part of the illusion of
Because
self.
we gotta cut it down soon. It's already 1 hour and a half.
We're way over time.
Yeah, we are.
Um,
Because this ego one, we got deep. It's gonna have to be a second part to this one. I got two other parts.
This is actually a really good conversation because it brings up a lot of points that, like, maybe in the eyes of, like, for example, it would be easy, but it's not. It's to certain people. It's not viewed that way. But if we as people that we are sharing this knowledge with them, we have to tell them that it is easy and that you can do it too. Because if
Absolutely.
you don't, and if you feed into that, you have all these traumas, you have all this pain, you have you're feeding that kind of like beast.
Yes.
Like you're feeding that layer.
You're creating a customer, you're creating a client or patient.
But you're creating exactly. Like that frosting that Connor says that you can peel off. Yeah, but then it's becoming harder and more icy and harder to peel off.
More spiritual bypassing. More spiritual bypassing.
See, this is such a good, what a good segue into the next part of this conversation.
No.
But I want to finish this conversation. I want to give Laura some time to also express herself. But I know she chooses when she wants to or not, but I feel like she's been wanting to say something. She's just a lot more patient than the three of us. So
I would say that that's very true.
I'm gonna ask this to you, Laura, and I want you to then answer whatever you have to say and then answer, then finish and take us out. You know, if self is a story of a bit of a story of separation in itself, why do we separate and choose to come back together again in this life? What is the point of being human? Because we all do it. Because in a way, those traumas we go through as children, at least in this dark periods of this life, because it hasn't been like this, I don't believe, all the time on the planet, but it's almost like we know we're going to come in, we're going to get traumatized, we're going to forget, then we're going to remember, and then that's when we can keep going on. I feel like that's almost up until this point. I feel that was the point of being human, was to walk this path through the challenges and these illusions and the separation, to then be able to choose for ourselves what it really is. So what do you feel on that?
I'm going to answer this from the place of joy that it actually brings up for me, which is to have fun.
Yes. Which is hard sometimes.
As far as
That's literally what I was gonna say. I'm like, to experience itself, to experience ourselves, to experience itself. Like,
paradox of paradox of paradox.
And to experience God. Like, I would imagine that being in another, like, if you wanted to, one of the things that I love, someone said the other day, is like 5D is really boring.
Mm-hmm.
It's I heard it and I was like, yeah, it probably is pretty boring.
Because you can't let any of the fun in, or it'll damage the whole thing.
So, like,
that makes sense. It does.
Like,
it does.
I
make
think
sense.
like if we have a lot of stories wrapped up around what it means to be human and what it means to be like a complete human and things like that. And I think that one of the key kind of impacts that has happened for me from Gospel of Thomas probably is just being childlike. And
but what does that mean? What does that mean, though, real quick? What does being childlike mean? We all have this idea of what that means, but what is childlike innocence?
to play.
Yes.
So the soul wants to play.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not engaging in life with a sense of play, then we're just taking it too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So one of the things that really struck me, and it's actually something Connor said about suicide, is that our souls aren't doing this. Our minds are. It's your mind that's throwing you off the bridge. And I think that anyone who's dealt with suicidal ideation, who's dealt with attempts, anything like that, most people who survive an attempt say they regretted it after they started.
Yeah, the Golden Gate
guy. That was a profound story.
But there's lots more people than him who aren't as vocal, who will all say the same thing. Your mind is doing this.
And yet people make multiple attempts too. So how powerful is that mind to be able to know in the moment and know the truth of the soul screaming like, whoa, hold on, hold up.
Do you know how much time and energy we put into this? I mean, I feel like that's why I look at suicide a little bit sometimes too, from a more of a higher lens. It's like, you just put so much time and energy into this and you're just going to quit it?
Well, we know not people's suffering.
No, it's the suffering. I'm not talking about the suffering. I mean, I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying from like a higher lens, it's like,
sure,
there's so much time and energy and love that's put into this. I call it a game, the game, because a game, play it, right? It's fun. It can be fun or it cannot be fun. It can be competitive, and then it's not fun when you get pissed off because you're losing. You see what I'm saying? So for me, that's why I call it a game, because you can take a game very serious. And right now, the most important things in the world are, sport ball. So games are important, and they're important to humanity. And that's why I feel that this is a game, but it's not at the same time.
And the important thing, though, is to think is like, when you're talking to people who are suffering, are you talking to their mind or are you talking to their soul?
Oh,
because
that was good.
The soul doesn't need steps to reach enlightenment. The soul doesn't doesn't need like, okay, now you need to do this.
Mhm.
Now this modality will work for you. The soul wants to know, it wants to be met with play. It wants to be met with the possibility that, and as you're talking about all these things you need to do, and you don't. So when I talk to someone, and as speaking to someone who deals with anxiety and depression myself and has dealt with this and then treats a lot of people who deal with it, the last thing they want to hear is how much work there is to do. No one wants to hear that, who's in that place.
Mhm.
No one does.
Mhm.
And the soul knows it's bullshit right away.
Mhm.
You say it.
Mhm.
And so the goal is surrendering the idea that there's work to do. And
accepting that.
And accepting that it can be instantaneous.
Yeah.
This is one of the hardest things for
Yes.
all of us who are spiritual, who are in this, is that that we need to configure into a way. The reality is, for me, is that right before you get through the doorway and you see the light of God, it feels the darkest it's ever been in your entire life.
Dark winter of the soul.
And the thing is when you're in that place, you have no concept of what it will be like on the other side until you get to the other side.
Birth.
It's a birth.
And a death.
So you
Mhm.
just have to say to people, trust it. And this is the power of a healer who is maybe 2 or 3 steps ahead of the person you're working with, and why it's so important to work with just know the relationship you're in right relationship with the people you're working with. Because to look at someone and I can say to them, I know, and it's just there. I know it feels like you're blinded. I know you don't think you can do it, but I promise you, you're almost there. And I think that
they are doing it.
they are doing it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They're seeking. They're doing it.
It's the same thing in birth. Like I said earlier, not you can do it. You are doing it.
I like that.
And I think one of the most powerful things that a colleague of mine ever said to me when I was suffering, she said to me, when you can't hear God is when he's holding you the closest. And we can ignore pronouns and however you want to put it. But when you can't see, when you can't hear, and you feel like you're completely disconnected, that is the moment right before you get to the other side.
It is so true. It is so true. Thank you for that. That was absolutely beautiful. Well, I think that's about wraps it up for this week's episode. I mean, that was a wonderful conversation. I feel lit up. Connor, do you have anything you want to say before taking us out? Lena, do you have anything you want to say before?
I love y'all. I love y'all, and I love everyone listening.
Just be who you want to be, and that's all it is.
And it's okay if you don't know who that is. That's
exactly,
the seeking. That's
because
the seeking.
you are doing it, right? You're doing
it. You're doing it. And so with that, we're so grateful that you all joined us today. We're so grateful to have this amazing conversations with such amazing individuals. If you could be so kind and like this video, subscribe to our channels and our social media, share it wherever you feel it can really benefit people. These are raw, vulnerable conversations. We throw our stuff out there because we just feel that it's time. It's time that we have these. It's time that we come together and we heal together, because we're already healed. We're already perfect. We're already ascended. So let's just be one.